1 year and 1 day after the Kings and Clippers legendary double overtime game that ended in a Kings win 176-175, the Kings found themselves in a similar position going down to LA against the Clippers as underdogs. And again, they pull out the big win. This time, not quite as exhilarating, but still from a Kings perspective, a very fun game to watch because it was one of, if not the most complete performance of the season. From the first minute of the game to the 48th minute of the game, the Kings were competing and playing well on both ends of the floor. It felt like there was never a let up. And the Kings were able to maintain a lead throughout almost the entire game. And they got up by as much as 18 in the third quarter. But then, of course, the Clippers, a very good team, they come back and they make their run and, they cut it down to a two-possession game in the fourth quarter. But the Kings just kept fending them off. And for once, the Kings were actually able to not blow the Clippers out per se, but make it so that it didn't come down to, intentional fouls and free throws by the end, because we all know it's not good when the Kings start getting intentionally fouled. That's when disaster can happen with missed free throws. We've seen that way too much this season, so it was nice to be able to, put in the reserves at the end for at least a minute or two and not have to sweat too much on free throws. This was the Kings' third win in a row and puts them at fifth place in the West, which is kind of the leading place of the middle of the pack of the West. It's really tight in there. And this is just another one of those games. It feels like every time the Kings have a little bit of a disappointing stretch, which they did right before the All-Star break, losing at home to the Pistons, losing 4 out of the last 6. It was disappointing, but they had a big win in Denver on the second night of a back-to-back right before the All-Star break. Then they take care of business at home against the Spurs, and now they go into LA. Yes, they didn't have Paul George, but that's still a pretty stacked Clippers squad. And they're able to get a big win. And so now it feels like they're going to, have another letdown against the Heat, a Heat team that has some suspensions. It is a back-to-back for the Kings, but it just feels like that's kind of, there's always these big wins, get a few in a row, but then just can't totally grab momentum because there's a letdown. So I feel like if the Kings win that game against the Heat, then we're looking real good then. But we'll get to looking forward to that game. We obviously still have to focus on this game. And before we, worry about another letdown, we can enjoy this game in what it was. And this was a performance led by De'Aaron Fox, who just when he doesn't rely on the three-pointer, he is amazing. And he's been amazing these last 4 games, scoring 33 points, 0 for 4 from 3, like only taking 4 3-point attempts. That's what we like to see. Obviously, it'd be good if he, didn't score, 0 from 3, but I just don't really care that much about his 3-point shooting. Like, that's secondary, that's an added bonus. And sometimes he's become too reliant on that. But you can tell when he wants to, he can get inside and dominate from any spot on the floor and get to his spots. And he was doing that in this game, operating inside. It's why he got to the free throw line 10 times. It's why he got 7 assists. Because when he actually gets into the lane, he's drawing all that attention and is able to find the open teammates instead of just sitting at the 3-point line and shooting all the time. That's not going to create anything for his teammates. And also just the way he was competing on both ends of the floor. He got pissed off when James Harden got another one of those calls where, Fox is trying to go alongside him, and then Harden uh, initiates the contact and gets the foul call. And it is a foul by the way the rule is officiated today. But it's the type of foul call that obviously everyone hates. And Fox got annoyed by it, got a technical. And then the ensuing 4 possessions were just a masterpiece. And this was the beginning of the fourth quarter. And in the third quarter, it felt like the officiating kind of kept the Clippers in the game, which obviously is what led to Fox getting super frustrated, right? It was just the Clippers living at the free throw line, and the Kings not getting those calls. And then when the Kings wouldn't get the call inside, it would lead to a fast break for the Clippers. So it felt like there was a bunch of 4-point swings the Clippers' way, which made the game, it was a 9-point game going into that fourth quarter. And it felt like maybe it should have been more like 15. And so then the Clippers make their run, they get it a little closer, and Fox just gets fed up and he decides to take over the game. Goes down, gets a score. Then come the other way, he's guarding James Harden, hits the ball off of Harden and forces the turnover. Then he goes down, scores again, comes back the other way, is super physical but without fouling and forces the jump ball. Then loses the jump ball, but then Duarte was able to get the back tap, and so it led to a turnover. And that was just such a hype string of plays where Fox was just taking over on both ends of the floor and stopping the Clippers' run and making those non-Sabonis minutes a positive for the Kings, and that was huge. And the that didn't put the Clippers away. The Clippers stayed in the game, and when Fox went out, they made a bit of a run, and then it was Sabonis and Monk to then quiet that one. But I just love watching when De'Aaron gets pissed off, because I just think he's not the type of player to be able to play at 100% for all 82 games. I think Domantas Sabonis is kind of special in the way he's able to go at 100%. And for a lot of guys, they just can't. I feel like so Fox is one of those guys where, he has been a little banged up. And so he doesn't go at 100%. He's not driving to the rim every single time. But then in these, important games and important moments, he's able to turn it on. And it's why with him having like a quiet 2 months or so, it's never really worrying, because as long as we make the playoffs, I have the utmost confidence that he will be able to turn it up in the playoffs. And usually he turns it up after the All-Star break, and that's kind of what we're seeing here. But outside of De'Aaron Fox, it was just an all-around performance from everyone, contributions from everywhere, a super balanced scoring attack. Of course, Fox had his 33, but then you look at the starters, all in double digits. Sabonis had a slow start finishing around the rim. And, there's a little bit of a worry with him going against Zubats. Like, is he ever going to be able to get it to go around the rim? And he started, maybe 2 for 10? But then he finished 7 for 17 and with 17 points. And, of course, the triple-double with 15 rebounds, 12 assists. But he was also impressive on the defensive end. He got 3 steals, was super active inside with his hands, but then also the rim protection that doesn't show up in the stat sheet, being able to go straight up at the rim. And the Kings did a really good job of containing Kawhi Leonard. And Kawhi, he got his 20 points, but he had to work hard for those 20 points. He made some tough shots, and the Kings were throwing bodies at him. They were forcing James Harden to play from the perimeter and take threes, and he went 2 for 10 from 3. James Harden got to the free throw line. That's just going to happen. He went 10 for 10 from the free throw line. That's just what he knows how to do. But I thought the Kings did a pretty good job of containing those two guys and then forcing other guys to beat them. And the other guys for the Clippers did a solid job. Like Zubats was killing us from the floater area, especially early on. And it was because there was just so much attention on James Harden and Kawhi Leonard when they would drive to the basket that Zubats would be wide open, and they had to help off of him, and he was playing really well. You had Norman Powell, who was starting for the injured Paul George, and he goes 5 for 9 from 3, hitting some very impressive shots. And Terrence Mann got his 14 points. But then outside of those guys, the Kings were able to do a really good job on Russell Westbrook, and then there just wasn't much other production from the Clipper bench. And so the Kings were able to contain the 2 main star scorers for the Clippers and then just try to run the 3-point shooters off the line and force the ball into the hands of non-3-point shooters, whether that be, Terrence Mann to some extent, or Zubats, or Russell Westbrook, Daniel Tice, PJ Tucker, those guys, even Amir Coffey. And I thought they did a really good job of closing out on shooters the correct way most of the time, depending on who it was that they were closing out on. Kevin Herter did foul Harden once on a three, but after that, it was all good. And just speaking of Kevin Herter, I thought Herter was really impressive. Uh, Both him and Barnes offensively. I mean, when both of those guys are hitting threes at a good rate, the Kings are super hard to beat. Like Keegan Murray, even going 3 for 7, but he had an off shooting night at 4 for 11. And you have Lyles who didn't even get a look at three. You have Malik Monk going 2 for 6. You have Duarte going 1 for 3. Sabonis didn't hit one. Fox didn't hit one. But then you still, despite all those guys either not shooting well or not shooting the best percentage, then you still have other guys that knock down from three. And I think Barnes and Herter are the two most important guys when they're hitting from deep. And there's just something about like every time the ball hit those guys' hands, I was just so confident that the shot was going in, especially Barnes from the corner. He's just been money all season. But then it's also what those guys did within the 3 point arc. When they were given the opportunities, they did a really good job of taking advantage, driving inside when they would get run off the 3 point line. Herter scored 2 straight floaters. You had Barnes going to the rim. There are a few plays from Barnes. Don't know exactly what happened because the broadcast sucks and, is like showing something else while the play is happening. But then, I saw that, Barnes scored, so it must have been something good. And when those two guys are able to have such balanced scoring nights, being able to knock down 50% of their threes, knock down those open threes, but then also get a few buckets inside and attack the rim efficiently, the Kings offense is just so beautiful to watch. And there was never any point in this game where the Kings offense stagnated. And I think one big reason for that is just Fox being able to create so much for himself. So when Sabonis wasn't on the floor or when we didn't have all the offensive firepower on the floor, then Fox would just go score himself. Like that helps a lot. But also just Barnes, Keegan, Herter, plus Monk all playing pretty well in terms of scoring the basketball just made the offense so fluid throughout all 48 minutes. And then on the defensive side of the ball, a lot of the criticism this season goes towards Harrison Barnes, a lot of it. And then with Kevin Herter, it's kind of up and down how he is defensively. I thought both of those guys were super impressive. And the team in general was just super physical, but without fouling a ton. There were times where they were getting called for fouls, especially in that third quarter. But I thought they did a really good job of contesting around the rim, sending double teams when necessary, and then rotating correctly to the right shooters and leaving the right guys open. You're not going to play perfect on all possessions. So, there were the possessions where Norman Powell would get an open three or when Terrence Mann was just wide open. But those moments were few and far between. So that was huge. And whenever the ball would go inside for the Clippers, it felt like the Kings just had so many bodies there to meet them and super active hands. The ball was always getting deflected inside. And the Kings ended this game with 10 steals. I talked about, the fluidity of the Kings offense from the first minute to the 48th minute. And it was fluid. It did look pretty. But in the first quarter, it was still, the shots weren't always going down. It wasn't an explosive offensive quarter. We weren't shooting a great percentage. But what really saved it was how many offensive rebounds the Kings were getting. And if Sabonis was finishing better inside, then it would have been a different story. But with him not finishing well, then we needed to be good on the offensive glass. Sabonis himself, 7 offensive rebounds. Again, probably a lot of those on his own misses, but he was a beast inside. And him versus Zubats, I mean, that's just two grown men going at it. Very physical inside. Very, very physical. But I thought the rebounding was a big part of this game. The Kings just keeping possessions alive. I thought Keegan and Barnes were both really good on the offensive glass, trying to keep balls alive. You had Lyles getting in there, trying to keep them alive and getting extra possessions. And for most of the game on the other end, on the other side of the court, the Kings did a pretty good job of keeping the Clippers off the glass. And I thought that was especially impressive because when you're throwing doubles at guys a lot, like the Kings were with Kawhi, or even blitzing on Harden a couple times, when you get in rotation, it can be hard to rebound. And that's one of the reasons the Kings get offensive rebounds, is because their offense is in constant motion and it can be hard to block out when an offense is in constant motion. So I thought the Kings' defensive rebounding was impressive for most of the game until the fourth quarter. The Kings went small, and they went small on the bench the entire game because Alex Len was out due to illness. We didn't see JaVale McGee. The Clippers are running Daniel Tice, not the biggest guy, at the backup center. But so you had Trey Lyles out there playing the small ball five, and they couldn't get a rebound at the start of the fourth quarter, and it allowed the Clippers to get like 5 or 6 shots within the first 2 possessions. But then the Kings also got offensive rebounds, I think, on their first 2 possessions of the fourth quarter, and scored off them as well. So it was going both ways. But I think other than that spell at the start of the fourth, they were pretty good. Except again, later in the fourth, I swear the Kings are a good rebounding team for like the entire game until the last few minutes of the game. And then I don't know what happens. It feels like other teams always get big offensive rebounds. And it felt like we were about to put the game away. And then you have Malik Monk just jumping, the worst timed rebound attempt I've ever seen, when he could have just stood there and picked up the ball. But he like jumps on the spot, doesn't get the rebound. And then the Clippers miss again and get the offensive rebound. But luckily the Clippers missed all 3 shots. And that was pretty much the end of the game once they missed 3 times on that one possession. But I think for most of the game, they were pretty good on the defensive glass. Just have to clean up in the fourth quarter. Off the bench, Malik Monk had 12 points, 5 assists. Like, not the biggest game for him, obviously, 4 for 11. But it didn't need to be the biggest game because, like I said, Barnes was shooting well. Herter was shooting well. Fox going off. So you don't need Malik to go huge, and the defense, obviously, for the Kings contributing to that. And so it's just big in the instances where Malik isn't the guy that's scoring a bunch or creating everything, for him to just not make a bunch of dumb mistakes, because sometimes he can, at times, he can be a big negative on the court if he's turning the ball over a bunch in the pick and roll. And so it was good that he was able to just keep it simple, go to his floater, just be a maestro in that pick and roll game. And he did exactly what he needed to do. Davion came in, hit a big 3. I mean, the Clippers were backing off him so far. He went 1 for 2 in meaningful minutes and then hit 1 late as well. Defensively, we saw him again trying to pull the chair. Like, he's so quick backing up. He got called for a couple fouls. One of them, the first one, was definitely a foul on him. The second one, maybe not so much. I mean, the Clippers are just definitely one of those teams with guys that are going to try to plow into you and get a foul call, with Westbrook, with Harden. And then you even had Kawhi hitting Sabonis in the face with the ball and getting a foul call. Maybe there was a foul before it. I don't know. I didn't really look at the play, but that was just funny. But with Davion, it seems like he cannot get a call when he's trying to, back up and pull the chair on guys. And that's unfortunate, because it's so funny when it works, when he's able to just totally back up and the opposing player is just totally out of control because he's expecting body contact. I thought Duarte was super impressive defensively, because earlier in the season, he tried to play super physically, but would just get called for so many fouls. He was leading the league in fouls per minute. But I kept saying, like, if he can just figure out how to stop fouling, he can be a really good defender. And we've seen that more lately. He's been a much better defender without fouling. He was super physical in this game, but without fouling. And then he stepped into a 3 super confidently that wasn't that open. Like, I mean, it was slightly open, but not that open. I don't know how I felt about that, but he knocked it down. And he's been knocking down his 3s lately. So playing physically without fouling, being a positive on that end. His closeouts are really impressive, the way he's able to close out really well, but then stay in front of the opposing player. And then if he can knock down 3s at a solid percentage, then he can definitely be a rotational player. Right now, he's trending up, and we'll see if that lasts or if it's just another one of those plays good for a little bit, then he stops playing well, and then we see some Keon Ellis. Same with Davion. In all likelihood, that's probably how it will be. Maybe we'll see some, Kessler Edwards at some point. But for right now, Davion and Duarte are playing well enough to maintain their spots in the rotation. And with them coming off the bench, obviously you're not just playing the bench all at once. But still, with those guys coming off the bench, it's not the most potent bench offensively. There's no Terrence Davis coming off the bench like last season. Obviously, we have Monk, and then we have Lyles, who is hot and cold. Outside of that, not too much offense. And so that's why it is important that Duarte and Davion can knock down threes at a respectable rate for them to both at the same time maintain their spots in the rotation. Speaking of other bench guys, a guy who I don't think he's played a minute for the Kings yet, two-way player Mason Jones, but he picked up a technical, which is hilarious. A very soft technical. Like, yeah, he went on the court. The ball's on the opposite end. Who cares? He got off the court quick enough. Stop ruining the moment. Stop being the fun police. What are we doing here? Kawhi missed the free throw, so ball don't lie. But after that massive Sabonis dunk on Zubats, which really surprised me, Sabonis has been catching so many bodies recently. And this one was kind of the craziest of them all to me because Zubats is a big guy and he was pretty far out when he went for that dunk. But I love it. I love him trying to dunk on guys, especially how the game started with Zubats for the first quarter getting the better of Sabonis. And then Domas is like, yeah, we can't be having that. Not at all. Also, another hilarious moment was Sabonis. He was on the ground a lot in the first quarter. We saw him first fall, maintain possession of the ball, and then like dish it to Herder under the rim for a layup, which was pretty funny. But then we also saw him miss a layup, miss the putback, fall on the ground, with the ball, and then while on the ground, sitting in the middle of the key, pump fakes. I mean, what was going through his brain? Was he actually considering shooting from the ground? Because he was very open. There was no one around him. He had a clean look at the rim, sitting right under the basket. Was there any part of him that was actually going to shoot that? Or what was his thought process? I'm not sure, but then he passed it back out. Just a very funny moment. I haven't really talked too much about Keegan. I mentioned that he struggled with his shot. He went 3 for 7 from 3, which is fine, but just 4 for 11 overall. But he was big rebounding the ball, but then also big on the defensive end, being able to stay in front of guys and use his length. But it really, like this game, like every individual played well defensively, and there were some guys who stood out, but it was just the way that no individual really got exposed because the team was playing so well together and covering for each other and not allowing guys to go one-on-one who shouldn't be going one-on-one. You're not allowing Kawhi Leonard to just go one-on-one with whoever he wants. There was a moment where Russell Westbrook had the ball against Kevin Herter, and I was like, oh, no. He's going to drive here. And he just pulled up for a midi, kind of bailed us out there. And Westbrook just settled for jumpers way too much. But yeah, just the way everyone was ready to help in the paint, but not just in the paint, because a lot of times once you're helping in the paint, it can be too late. And so it was the help before that and the way everyone was covering for each other and rotating and playing on a string. Everyone was on the same page, and it was beautiful to watch. Also, I got to talk about the 5 minutes PJ Tucker played. How is that guy still in the league? And I constantly see things about him complaining about minutes and stuff. Like, I mean, that guy's just not good, right? I mean, if he's guarding Fox. First of all, why? Second of all, Fox just went right by him every time, or right at him every time. That was just confusing to me. We now move on to an interesting game against the Heat, who the Kings lost to earlier in the season in Miami. It is a back-to-back for the Kings, but it is at home. And what makes it interesting is the Heat have players suspended because of a brawl with New Orleans. So you have Jimmy Butler suspended, Nikola Jovic, Thomas Bryant. There are also other guys who are questionable coming into the game. You have Josh Richardson out, Drew Smith out. Tyler Hero and Terry Rozier are both questionable, along with Orlando Robinson, I believe. And so there's going to be a lot of guys out, or at least some guys out, and then we'll see about other guys. But either way, with Jimmy Butler out, it's a game that, I mean, the Kings should win. I don't love saying that. The Heat have been, okay this season. It's the regular season Miami Heat. Terry Rozier hasn't really found his footing, but if he plays, I'm sure he'll find his footing in this game because he always kills us. But the Kings, after starting the season 0-4 on the second night of back-to-backs, they are now 4-4. So they've won their last 4 games after it was a bit of a talking point earlier in the season where it's like, man, the Kings cannot play on the second night of a back-to-back. They've been much, much better now. And so we'll see if they can continue that. I mean, without Jimmy Butler, it should just be so much easier to defend this team because it means Kevin Huerter doesn't have to be guarding one of Tyler Hero or Terry Rozier. Like I said earlier, this feels like a game where it could be a bit of a letdown. It's not like we're playing against a horrible team like some of the past letdowns have been, and it's the second night of a back-to-back. So, there are those two things. But it is a depleted Miami team. And it just feels like we've already used up all of those losses like this. This might be as easy as it gets coming down the stretch. But anyways, that is it for this episode of The Real Report. I will be back tomorrow night to recap this game against the Miami Heat. So I'll see you guys then. Peace.